All right, well, we'll just go and make a start, and then if other people trickle on, well, they're lost, they get to come late. So today what we're going to be focusing about first and foremost is debt management, spending less, spending more. So what I'm creating is here as a structure for you to go and be able to manage your money better, so that you're able to go and make your money work harder for you, go further, and what that translates into is achieving your goals. So realistically, money is just a tool, I believe. It's a means to an end, and the end is whatever you want it to be. So what I think money should be used for is going to be different to you. It's going to be different to you. And the key is to first go and decide, right, well, what is important to me? What matters in my life? And go from there to go and start creating what it is that you're going to be wanting to go and build when it comes to money. So because we've got some smaller numbers today, we're going to make it quite practical and get you guys all really involved. So Alex Foy, come down as well. Like, we're going to get you guys are going to be just as much participants this time too. Can't have you up the back. So traditionally, what you guys probably hear is the whole spend less, save more, and she'll be right. Oh, you're going out to shop too much because you're spending too much money there. So just cut that, then you'll have more money for everything else. And just cut everything that you happen to be spending on, and then just save the rest. Honestly, I think that's unrealistic. And I think that if your goal is to just take an axe to everything that you spend money on, then you're actually not going to be enjoying your life very much. And while this advice has got its place for people who spend irresponsibly, I think ultimately it's flawed for most people. So instead of just going and trying to spend less and save more, I think what you should do is work out, right, well, where am I spending my money? What things am I spending more money on than my priorities warrant? Like things that don't matter to you. Why am I spending so much money on these things that don't matter? And then you look at the things that do matter to you. Why am I not spending more money on those things? So that is, I think, the missing piece of the puzzle that people can really get a chance to improve on. So there's a key process that I think people should follow during this. Step one, which we went into quite a lot in our last seminar, is identifying your key priorities. Now, this is the key step. We're not going to get into it today, but essentially, if you know what your life goals are and what really matters to you, that is going to tell you what to prioritize, where to put your resources. And if your resources are going into these things and you're achieving these things, these are the things that are going to make you happy. So you need to start with that really good awareness of what your priorities are. And once you've got that really good awareness of your priorities, then you can say, all right, for me, my top priority might be having children before I'm 30. My second top priority might be having a house. My third top priority might be going and weighing 55 kilograms or whatever your target weight is. And when you go down the line that way, then you're able to go and say to yourself, all right, well, if this is my top priority, it should get more of my resources because I should be trying to achieve it ahead of my lower priorities. So that's why your priorities is the number one thing you should focus on first. Without that, it's like you're throwing darts at a dartboard with a blindfold on. You might as well not bother. At that point, you're just as likely to throw the dart in the wrong direction. That's what you end up, how people end up wasting a whole lot of money. Second step is tracking. So you need to build really good awareness. Again, we're not going to go into too much about the whole spending tracker thing this time and budgeting, but if you're really aware of where your money is going, I spend $400 a week on food, then you can feel that ouch, that, oh my God, I am spending this much money on food every week. Whereas if you don't know, I just don't know how much money I'm spending on food. Yeah, it's probably something reasonable, but I just don't know. Well, you're not going to change. You're not going to create something different that way. So awareness is really, really helpful and important, and keeping up to track with a spending tracker, I think, is the right way to go about that. So, okay, so you know your priorities, you're aware of what you're currently doing, and now it's time to start thinking of what you should change to get to where you want to be. So once you have got this awareness of how much you're spending on these different priorities, the next step is to start thinking about debt. So if you've got debt, that's a problem, because debt, also feel free to come down, by the way. We've got not so many people today. It's going to be quite interactive. So debt is a big issue because essentially what you're doing is you tend to pay quite a lot of money in terms of interest. And that payment you could be spending on so many other things. So before you even start looking at your spending, you need to look at debt first. So coming up with a good debt strategy is really key there, knowing how you're going to tackle it and how you're going to go about it. So after you've done that, we next look at your spending. It's easier to chop than to grow. So what that means is it's easier for you to look through your finances and go, I'm spending too much on this, I'm spending too much on that, I'm spending too much on this, chop, chop, chop. And then you're going to have more money available that you can use to grow the areas that need that money. It's normally better to chop before you grow. Otherwise, you risk having not enough money and going into a budget deficit. So this is the process, and now we're going to get into the fun stuff. So talking about debt management. So I know we've got some definitions up here, but in basic terms, what is a loan? Who wants to give it a stab? What's the basic idea behind a loan?
Borrowing money.
Yeah, borrowing money. So borrowing money means you're going to give it back, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that you're doing is, say you want to buy a house. How much money do you have saved roughly right now, Alex? Say 10,000, 20,000? So if a bank gives you 500,000, you can go out and buy a house now. Whereas how long would it take you to save 500,000? Ages, right? So the reason why you pay interest is you get that 500,000 now, not in a year, not in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years time. So that means that you can get that house now rather than later. And the interest payments are there because you've received this lump sum of money early. You haven't had to save for it. You get it now. So fundamentally, any time that you are borrowing money, there's an interest cost because you've got that money early. And the interest is that price. It's that price that you pay to get that money early. So let's think about it. If you've got an example like a house, who thinks it's a good idea to take out debt to buy a house? Okay, not a trick question, guys. So the reason, okay, who wants to give it a guess? Why is it a good idea?
Planning for your retirement. You can have a freehold to live in without paying.
What would justify paying interest to buy a house? So where would you be if you didn't own a house? Renting. You could be homeless. It's okay. It's okay. Homeless is also an option. I mean, you could live at the back of your car and you don't have to pay rent. That also works. So
I think the problem is that's the only option. That's the problem. That is the only option if you want to buy a house and you want to buy it now. You're left with no.
And you want to buy it in New Zealand, then yes.
yeah.
Well, technically anywhere. Like whenever I have saved
Not really. You move to countries like, for example, you move to the US, you could save, it doesn't cost. So a city with the same population as Auckland, the house cost is maybe $200,000, $300,000. You can save it up in a few years.
Okay.
Depends on location.
Yeah, it depends on location. So apart from that, suppose you're living in New Zealand.
No, gotta take that.
Because that's the only choice. So it's very difficult to answer the question of is there any other way other than taking a loan? Would you take a loan to get a house? And the answer is yes, but that's because it's the only option available to you to be able to afford a home rent at this moment.
Unless you've got, say, the parents that have got to
Yeah.
save money. There's other options like tiny homes, but they could be less palatable because they're tiny.
Yes.
There's other options too where you might be able to, say, get accommodation along with your work. Essentially, there's really only one major option, which is buying a house or renting.
And that's what it makes, the same reasons are what makes it challenging, because you're borrowing from your future self.
Yes.
You're thinking that at the age of 50, if I borrow now, I can afford this X number amount of house. And you're always in a, well, can you? We don't know. That's the challenge, right?
Exactly, because what you're doing is you're going to be paying to get access to that money now for a very long time to come. But let's flip the question. Rather than talking about a house, let's talk about a $50,000 car, a brand new car. Or maybe that's a bit more now, inflation. Heck, maybe it's $70,000. When you think about the interest payments there, and you can go and do the calculation for compound interest, maybe you'd pay $20,000 of interest over the course of the loan. Is it worth $20,000 to get this brand new car now? Probably not. That's why quite a few people buy secondhand. It's quite rare that people are buying brand new from a showroom and are willing to pay $20,000, like a very high sum of interest. People who need to finance it will typically finance for a secondhand car a lower amount, because you'd look at that and you just go, well, I don't think that the value of getting this now is worth it. In comparison, for a house, it quite often is worth it, because if you're paying rent, that's essentially money wasted, and paying rent versus paying a mortgage, you'd rather be paying a mortgage and going towards owning an asset. Yep.
Now, well, how would you consider the reality of people that will always be renters? Because, in this sort of capitalist society, not everyone can win, So some people have privileges, other people don't. Some people have rich parents who actively help them. Other people are just, they don't have many skills, or they, So what about them? Because I think there's sort of a default. The default mentality is like everyone's going to get a home, but I think in Auckland,
not everyone will.
Yeah.
And that really, I've got a lot of sympathy, because being realistic, it is really hard to go and afford to get into the market. And the time when the prices come down typically is when the interest rates are going up, and then it's harder to go and get a loan as well. And you're right, there are definitely plenty of people that just aren't able to, for whatever reason, get to the point of home ownership. For
even
them,
if they have a job, even if they have
and that really sucks. And for them, if you choose not to go down the route of home ownership, I would say that you're going to need to be careful to build a savings bank, because when you pass the point of retirement and you finish your job, then you're still going to have to keep on paying rent. You could potentially do things like having a house which you'd rent with, say, multiple families, or having flatmates. There's other options that you can use to help support yourself, but it really puts a lot of people in a really tricky position, and it means that a lot of people can't live in Auckland, for example, or they've got to make other compromises. And yeah, I really do feel for them, and it's really tricky. And they're exactly the sort of people that need to go and sit down and be very careful with their budget, and because they've got less resources to work with. They're the people that can benefit the most from going through this sort of exercise, because when you've got only enough food just to survive, it really matters how you use all of that food. So, whereas if you've got a mountain of food, you can be a bit more inefficient. So, putting it that way, they're the people that can benefit the most from this, I feel. So, jumping through, there's all sorts of different loans. Now, the first one I want to mention is student loans, because that should be pretty familiar to a lot of the people in this room. So student loans are a very special and different sort of beast. Does anyone know why? Think interest.
So in New Zealand,
Yeah.
I haven't I don't know the details, but I heard it's interest free if you stay in the country.
Exactly. So when you'd normally, because I was talking before and I was saying, all right, debt is this thing, you want to pay it off as fast as possible because typically the interest rates are much higher than any income you'd be able to get through investments. Student loan is the exception unless you want to go overseas, because you'll find with student loans that there's no interest being charged. So you're better to go and put your money first into other forms of debt and then to try to grow your money and to pay. Obviously, you've got to pay it back. And there's other considerations too, like if you're buying, say, a house. I know we're going back to the house example. Then the banks will be looking at how big your student loan is. So that could be a consideration to paying it back sooner. But that will go case by case. There's other sorts of debt as well. And debt, all sorts of debt aren't created the same. So rent arrears, as an example, you could be behind on your rent and you're owing the landlord money. That's the sort of thing that could really show up in your credit report. You could be behind on your power bill. So being behind is debt because you owe something. You owe money for a service that you've consumed. Typically, that is something which interest isn't charged, but then you've got the creditor chasing after you saying, pay me the money, pay me the money. You might be taken to tenancy tribunal. It's got other sorts of costs associated with it. It's not a fun place to be. Don't go there if you can help it. Typically, if you look through this list here, there's different sorts of interest rates that are being charged. So a loan shark, these have been an issue for a long time. They typically will prey on low-income people, a bit like the sorts of ones we were talking about. They'll say, don't worry that you can't afford this new TV or this new stereo. You can come to us, we'll give you the money, and we will charge you something like 50% interest a year. Ridiculous prices. Essentially, if you've got debt, you want to shift your debt from organizations like loan sharks to lower interest options that are out there. However, if you've got rubbish credit, because, for example, you don't earn much money, you might not be able to access lower interest rates, because the idea is that from the bank's point of view, if they don't think you're going to pay back the money, they don't want to lend to you, or they will lend to you at a higher interest rate. So be very careful to make sure you're paying off your highest rate of interest first. Take overdraft, for example. I hear people say, all right, well, I don't want to pay off my overdraft because I'm building an emergency fund. Well, I would say put your emergency fund into your overdraft, and then you can always take that money out again and build that overdraft back if necessary. But in the meantime, at least you're not paying interest on that balance. So be quite careful for your debt management. There's a lot of complexity there, and I think we can get more value out of the spending sort of side of things. But this will give you a good little overview. Before we move on, though, does anyone have any questions about the debt side of things?
I just had a question about mortgage, right? Like you said that, and it's needed like in most scenarios where the house prices are too high and all of that. But is there a general consensus on how much the mortgage should be in terms of like relative to your annual income?
That's a good question. Typically in New Zealand, there isn't a focus on this, at least from the bank lending point of view. So they're more focused on value compared to deposit. 20% is the sort of golden rule. If you drop down to 15, then you're going to be paying more interest. If you drop down to 10, you're going to be paying even more interest. As you can imagine, from the bank's point of view, they're worried about whether you can pay them back. Then what they'll do is they'll run the numbers and they'll say to you, right, well, how much money do you earn and what do you spend? And they'll run a viability analysis on whether you can pay them back. It's not so much how much you earn that's the issue. It's how much money is left over after you pay for everything.
Right.
So someone with a really high income that wastes all of it will actually be worse off than someone with a lower income that saves a lot. In theory, anyway. Like, obviously, if the low income is really low, then you've got issues. But it's not the amount of the income, it's the amount that's left after paying for everything that matters.
Right, but my question was more around, like, what's the ideal amount of mortgage that one should consider rather than over borrowing, if that makes sense. Like, for example, if the bank approves 700K, as a loan, right? But is there like a general number, and let's say the person is earning $50,000 or $60,000, that is like, almost 10x of their income, even though it's approved. But in that scenario, would you suggest not going for it? And,
It really depends on what your alternatives are. This is when you come down to the whole, what should I invest in and what's the return? So say you're going down the property line, you're relying on, say, capital gains, or maybe you've got an income because you might go and have a flatmate or Airbnb. It depends on what the income is that you're trying to get out of it compared to your alternatives. Take myself, for example. Would it be wise for me to go and focus on the property, or would it be wise for me to focus on reinvesting money into the company? So, it's
a trade-off.
It's a trade-off, and it's really going to depend on your personal circumstances.
Right.
I wish I could give you a clearer answer, but we've got two issues with it. One, time, and it's a really complicated issue, and this isn't investment focused.
Yep.
Two, I'm not a registered financial advisor, so I've got to be careful before I tell you this is the holy grail, this is the number, because I can't actually tell you a number. What I can do and what I am about is giving you the tools so you can make the decision yourself. I can't tell you sell, trade me, and buy crypto. Don't do that, by the way. But but what I can do is give you the tools so that you can make that decision for yourself, which makes sense because most of the time you're not going to have me there holding your hand. So better for you to learn how to do it yourself. So cutting down on fat. Okay, now the number one way to save you money is to negotiate. Now, sounds a bit counterintuitive, but think of it this way. My wife and I, we have gone and had a situation where we were getting a rental. And they came to us and they said, all right, well, $320 a week. That's what we think is fair. And I went back and I was scared that I wasn't going to get this rental. It was this nice studio apartment down in the Cambridge apartments, really close to my work. And I went and looked around and I knew that the market rate, the going rate, was about $290-ish. And I talked to them about it. I showed them the market range, and I said, look, we're good tenants. If you'd be willing to go and lend it to us, we know that $290 is the rate it should go for. And we came out at $300. So we lost a little, but we gained because essentially we were there for a year and a half. That's about $1,500 in our back pocket by being brave enough to negotiate. There's a lot of people that really struggle with that idea of negotiation. I'll be honest, before I went to India and Punjab, I really struggled with it. When you are facing rickshaw drivers that are going to go and charge you 10 times, 20 times, however many times the going rate, you've got to learn to negotiate fast. So anyway, I would recommend a trip to India if you're struggling to negotiate. You'll get good really fast, but pretty much practice. So it comes in all the time. Take, for example, we're on 2 Degrees. Did you know there's a loyalty discount that they're able to give you guys? Because they don't want to lose you to Vodafone. If you ring them up and you go and say, well, I've been with you guys for 2 years, you're expensive, I'm thinking of going elsewhere, what can you do for me to go and reduce the bill? I think it's 15 or 20% they'll reduce it by. You just got to ask. Take, for example, this isn't so much spending, but on the other side, asking your boss for a raise. Again, it's really hard to do because you're afraid of rejection. You're afraid of the consequences of it going wrong. But that sort of negotiation and that putting yourself out there and asking, that will really, really give you rewards in a lot of areas. There's more. Take this laptop here. Again, negotiate. You go and shop around and you go in the sales times and you say to the people, all right, well, I'm buying this and this and this and this off you because I bundle all my purchases into one. You're going to get commission. What can you do for discounts? And if they say that they can't do it, maybe ask to talk to their manager. You're not going to win all the time with negotiation, but the point is not to win. The point is to try. Get into that habit, because if you're only going to try to negotiate when you think that you're going to succeed, you're going to miss out on a lot of practice. And sometimes it's like when I called 2 Degrees, I had no idea that they offered loyalty discounts. And I found out, they're giving me a loyalty discount. Great, thanks, I'll take that. So the point is that just trying is going to really help you. If you're thinking about going and, okay, holidays are a good example too. I don't know about you guys. I don't use travel agents because I can normally go and plan things out in a better, more efficient way, especially for flights because I shop around. But if you do, discounts are available in currency. So again, I'm going to plug an app which I use myself, not sponsored or anything. Have you guys come across something called Wise before? TransferWise. Incredibly good app if you're transferring money because the exchange rate that they use is way better than what you get off the banks. And I crunched the numbers before we went to India for 4 months, and that was by far and away, when you were dealing with more than, say, $1,000, the best app that we'd come across. Go for it.
Try XC.
Try XC?
XC is better.
XC, thank you. I'm actually going to take a note of this, guys, and have a look as well when you get
Does
home.
it have a debit card with it?
No.
Oh,
It
just
doesn't
the
work that
transfer.
way. It doesn't work that way, but
Okay.
it gives you a good rate.
Cool.
On that topic, the Wise, that's really useful for the debit card too, because you can do multi-currency accounts and that sort of thing. Handy for businesses when you're dealing with different currencies. Handy when you're going on holidays to different places.
Doesn't any Visa card give you the same option, really?
It will, but then the problem is that if you're paying the bank rates, then for the currency transversion, that's an issue.
It can do if you have a 0% markup on the card, which is not available in New Zealand, but you have it on Indian cards. Some of the Indian cards.
That's really helpful as well. And again, it will matter which bank you go with. Say SBI, for example, would be different to say Punjab.
No, so this is
Because there's so many there.
Yeah,
There's so
but
much competition.
if it's a 0% markup card from any bank, you only get charged the rate that Visa charges you, which you will pay anyway with Wise, and Wise it'll be a little higher.
Well, there you go. So there's other alternatives out there, some of which I don't know. So thank you very much. This is great. So XE and 0% visas in India in particular, and other countries that offer it. But the point that I'm going for here is if you're going overseas on holiday or whatever to a country, an easy way to give yourself more money for your holiday is to spend less on currency conversion. So converting early, if the rate is good, like having a look around and figuring out what the going rate normally is, when it's good, when it's bad, and just simply using an app that's going to give you a better going rate than using the bank. That's the sort of basic thing. It's just going to save you money, make your money go further for you. So other examples here, electronics, like I was saying before, anything that's large, electronics, furniture, particularly if there's some sort of commission going, they'll normally be able to do discounts. So if you know that there are sales agents there trying to get you to buy from them, typically they'll be able to offer discounts. Even take the food for tonight, guys. So the shop that I went to was Hobson Takeaways. They sell samosas for $2.50. Today I bought 50 samosas. So the price, they were willing to negotiate $2 per samosa. When I bought 100, they were willing to go down to, what was it, $1.50. So that's pretty good going. But again, I've got to be willing to ask. If I just walk in and I say, I want 50 samosas, they're going to charge me $2.50. But if I say, I want 50 samosas and, hey, I'm buying 50 samosas from you, can you do me a deal? How would $2 a samosa sound? Then they call up, they go, oh, okay, I'm going to have to call up the owner. And you're going, is it going to be okay? But no, it's fine. So just get into that practice of negotiation. Seriously, that's the one thing that I think that has saved me the most money out of all of these habits over the years. Just get into that habit. Anytime you've got a chance to try, just try. It doesn't matter if people go, no, I'm not going to negotiate.
I think one of the things that hold me back from negotiating is the kind of negative response people give to it. Because I guess at the core, I like to people please. For example, today I went to this charity shop and I asked for a discount from this lady, and she was completely. It's really embarrassing for me, asking it. So she was really kind of I can't describe she's almost dumbfounded.
I second that. It makes me look cheap. Like I'm cheap or something, but I'm trying to be frugal.
Yes. Okay, guys, let me give you some confessions for myself. I am a born people pleaser. My whole focus through high school and academia was to earn good grades, to make my parents proud, because, I want to make other people happy. And that's why I'm saying this is really hard to do, to negotiate. Yeah, you can. Other people might think of you and think that you're cheap. They might look at you and go, who do you think you are to negotiate with me? But that's okay. That's on them. Ultimately, if you're comfortable with yourself and you're feeling okay in yourself, hey, they might not like me, but I'm okay. That's what really matters at the end of the day. And building that up is really important. There's definitely resources that are out there for coaching, for people pleasing, and it's a topic really close to my heart. Because again, I suffer from this, and me sorting this and tackling this out is really the biggest key to being able to invite monetary success, because ultimately, otherwise, whenever you're engaging with someone else, you're wanting to please them. And whenever there's money involved, you're going to be willing to give up what's in your interest to serve them. So seriously, it's amazing. Like, I'm really impressed that the first thing that came out of your mouths was people pleasing, because I was going to be talking about that for myself. And it's amazing that you've got that presence of mind, that you've actually identified it. Like, seriously, kudos to you. And that's the biggest thing I think you're able to work on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's such low stakes as well. Like, if you practice it in negotiating when you're buying like a couch, you're never going to see that person again. So no matter what reaction they give you, the more you do it, the more you realize it doesn't actually dictate my value, them giving me this reaction. And the more you practice it and stuff like this, when you'll never see it again, the easier it is to kind of like set your boundaries with other people that you do see in your life as well.
Exactly. And this is where going to India really made a big impact on me, because you're literally doing it every day. You have like thieves coming along pretty much that will try to charge you ridiculous prices, and you've got to just tell them. And then they can look at you all funny and go, hey, you're white, you can afford that. And then you've got to be willing to go and look at them and say, well, no, I might be able to afford a higher price, but I'm going to pay what the actual rate is, go away. If you're not willing to do it, I'll go buy from someone who is. And that feels really, really hard, because you're like, well, they've got a point. I can afford it. What do I do? But it's practice putting your own interests first, and that's really hard. And yeah, I've really struggled with that myself for a number of years. So still struggling with it, if I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. But yeah, that's huge. And I love that we've got to this topic, because this is totally off topic what we've got up here, but this is a really big one. Ultimately, most of your financial issues, I think, are emotional at their core. If you're spending heavily on something, it's to fill some sort of need. And if you can work out what that need is, then you'll be able to address that spending. It's like, take a compulsive alcoholic wondering why they spend so much money on alcohol. Do you think they're going to be able to stop spending if they just try for alcohol? No, because they've got to address that emotional need that the alcohol is filling. And once you've addressed that, then you can cut the alcohol off. The point is that a lot of the bad habits and the problems we've got financially stem from emotional needs and emotional issues. And that's really hard to get to. And I think that people as well don't put enough value on addressing the emotional side, because if you can really transform what you're doing financially. And then that has a flow-on effect, because then you've got all these resources that are available for the rest of your life, and that transforms the rest of your life. It's like, that can be something that I try to focus on. It's like when I was negotiating for the rent and really struggling there with that, I was going, right, well, $1,500, what will this mean to me and my wife? Oh, and bringing someone else in, like my wife, that makes it easier for me, because I'm not just doing it for me now, I'm doing it for somebody else too. When you're a people pleaser, that really helps.
Another issue, like I was tracked my spending for last year.
Yep.
And I had spent thousands of dollars on like emotional, I would call it comfort spending, like comfort eating.
Mm-hmm.
Just to, like, the idea of spending money makes you feel really good. And that comfort, gives you comfort. And how do you deal with that? That's another question.
Great question. So pretty much what we're going to have to think of there is, well, how do we meet that need for comfort? What makes you feel comfortable? And what are the other ways of getting that comfort other than things that cost a whole lot of money, which flows on exactly into this slide. So what you might think, for example, maybe brownies. Oh, I love a brownie. I don't know about you, but they just make me feel so happy and so peaceful, and I love it. So maybe if you know that you love brownies, if you know that you feel nice eating this sort of food, maybe invest in either making some brownies yourself or paying someone to go and just make you a whole big cake or a whole big load of brownies, chop it up, and whenever you feel that need, have one. Sure, you're still going to spend money on it, but it's going to be so much less. So rather than, it's a bit like that whole alcoholic thing I was talking about. Rather than telling yourself, nope, I have no emotional needs anymore in relation to food, chop them off. Don't do that. Give them a cuddle and say, what can I do to meet this need in a way that's better for me financially? What is it that I'm really looking for? Be kind to yourself and try to meet your needs, and just once you figure out what your needs are, then you can address them. Again, amazing presence of mind that you know what it is that you're trying to do, and then you can just work out, well, what is the most financially viable way of meeting your need?
Yeah, I guess because you're talking about cutting down the fat and the debt and all that.
Mm.
But yeah, if we don't address those major things,
Mm.
you still have the same. The other things are going to be cosmetic change,
Exactly. But at the same time, I think that people that just say, oh, well, just stop eating out, that's not realistic for a lot of people, because if there's an emotional thing going on, you've got to address that emotion first. Maybe you might be feeling lonely. Okay, I'm not saying this about you. I'm just going to give it examples about random people. Because again, obviously I don't know your particular situation. So this is not aimed at you. People might be lonely, for example, and when they go out to eat at a cafe, that might be a time that they interact with other people. And that loneliness means that they eat out a lot. So addressing that loneliness by, say, scheduling in more time with friends might have a flow-on effect. They don't need to eat out so much. Maybe that you think that the only way to, we talked about shared lunches sharing food last time, going around to a friend's house, you bring something, they bring something, rather than going out to restaurants. There's alternatives as well that you can do. Maybe that there's other ways, non-food related, to address that emotional need. But getting clear on that emotional need, working out what are the different options I've got to meet that emotional need, and then choosing the one that is most in your favor, that's the best way to do it, rather than just try to cut off that emotion. It's going to bubble up in other areas.
Yeah.
So better to work with yourself than against yourself. And I want to judge us, again, this is what makes me actually quite frustrated and angry sometimes with the traditional financial advice of just cut that spending off. You don't need to eat out. Because some people, what that does is that really has a lack of empathy about why people are doing this. And you've got to understand why before you just tell people to cut that spending. So that's really important. Again, giving you some other quick examples. So how many of you have tried buying nuts at Countdown? How much a kilo is it at the moment for something like cashews or almonds? Maybe $30 a kilo if you're lucky?
It's more than that.
More than that? Okay, if you go to the Lotus supermarket, Indian supermarket, I think it might be 16 a kilo. Could be 20 a kilo right now because its prices have gone up a little. But the point is that there's a massive price differential depending on where you buy. Short story, and again, it varies between Indian supermarkets. I found Lotus is quite good, so I go there quite a bit.
Where is that, Lotus?
It is out
Stoddard
Road. Yeah, it's really good. So it's like my wife and I, we live in Raglan. We've come to Auckland for the seminar. Tomorrow or the day after, we're going to Lotus and we're going to stock up on kilograms of nuts, kilograms of lentils, kilograms of rice, kilograms of flour. And this is going to save us hundreds, literally hundreds, without compromising our health. Same sort of thing as what you're talking about for emotions. So you might say nuts cost too much. I just have to cut that out and take the health costs that's going to come with it. Well, you could do that, or you could find alternatives, or you could find, for example, other places that sell them at a better price.
Another good option is Costco.
Yes.
Anybody hasn't got it? Yeah.
Exactly.
Refrigerates.
Produce, fresh produce is another one. So we all know that the price of fresh fruit and veggies has gone up substantially. Buy in season, whatever you do. Asparagus was really cheap for a couple of months when it was in season. I wouldn't buy it now. It's out of season. It's not only are you going to be going and buying a product that's more expensive, it's inferior in nutritional value, it's inferior for taste, and quite often you've got to get it shipped in from overseas. Why would you do that? You're literally paying more money for things that aren't as nice. So,
how do you know what's in season?
Great question. And actually, this year has been really hard for that because we've been having a whole lot of natural events that have really mucked things up. First thing you do is you've got to think, what is grown in New Zealand locally? So, for example, right now, it's sweet corn season. So Google will really help you with this for or like on vegetable growers and that sort of thing. So right now, sweet corn is $5 for $5 and pack and save quite often. Again, good quality sweet corn, and you can literally steam it, 1 or 2 of them. There you go. That's a meal. Say 2 of them. Then that's like pretty safe. Again, cheap, reasonable food, but you don't want to have sweet corn every day. For example, right now, you might be thinking about berries because, again, we're in summer. This is berry season. We had a massive unseasonable patch of cold weather, and earlier in the season, a whole lot of them got taken out, and it was expensive, but now the prices are coming down. This is probably pretty much your main time to buy berries. If you don't do it now, you'll be waiting until summer next year.
This app here is a produce company.
So, yep, there's an app. Do you want to show it around, sweetie?
Produce.co.nz.
Oh,
They're
well,
actually a company, but they've got just a chart. Yeah.
Yeah, I really recommend it because I am massive on health, guys. I think nobody should be compromising their health, but there's a myth that eating healthy means eating expensive, and it's not true. So I don't know how many of you guys, who knows what khichdi is? Okay, 1. Khichdi, 2, 3 if you count me. Khichdi is probably one of the cheapest foods you can make. That's also one of the healthiest and one of the easiest. And what a surprise, this isn't really well advertised in the West. Literally, it's rice and mung dal, and you can add vegetables as well. You put it in a pressure cooker and done. It comes out, it's all sorted, and you can cook it in bulk really easily, and it's really cheap. In India, it's the sort of thing that people might look down upon as poor people food. But it's literally cheap and easy, so why wouldn't you? So there's a lot of options like that. And typically you'll find that if you're buying highly processed food from the frozen section, that's going to be quite expensive. So instead of that, when you can make things if you can, that's all just make simpler food, make it in bulk, that typically will be better. Again, you'll have seen different prices if you're buying in bulk, typically better. Prices are different at Pack and Save compared to Countdown. The other thing is don't look down on frozen vegetables. That could be a good way to get, say, spinach and that sort of thing out of season at a reasonable price and at reasonable nutritional value. There's lots of little tips like that you can do when shopping. But moving on from the supermarket, clothes is another big one. So how much does a new shirt cost? Probably $100 if you're getting like a high quality sort of shirt. Versus if you are willing to go to secondhand shops or do clothes swaps with friends and that sort of thing, fraction of the cost. If you're willing to buy secondhand, is what I'm trying to say, you'll make massive savings over if you were to buy new. So every time I would highly recommend secondhand when you can. So Facebook Marketplace is your friend. My wife and I recently bought a lovely mirror, about 1 meter high, beautiful woodwork design, $30. Well painted, no issues with it. And that's the sort of thing that if we were to buy it new, maybe $200, $300. And again, it takes some time looking at that sort of stuff. But if you are willing to invest that time in going secondhand, it will save you money. But again, you need to know what you want. Final sort of thing here too is petrol. Now, how many of you guys have come across the Z app before? Or GasBuy? GasBuy tells you pretty much like the price of the different petrol outlets and the locations. But the Z app is one of the most underrated apps that I think is going to become very useful soon. So what you can do is, first of all, you buy fuel ahead of time at the price which is lowest amongst all the Z stations within 30 kilometres. So first off, it saves you having to actually drive around. Second of all, who goes out of Auckland to Hamilton every now and then? Say you go out to Hamilton and while you're there, you buy 200, 300, 400, 500 litres worth of fuel. You're not paying Auckland fuel tax when you're in Hamilton. And that's immediately going to touch 20, 30 cents off. Right now, you guys might know that there is a discount in the tax right now that's going on for fuel. I think that's going to come off closer to the election time because, blame the opposition for removing it if they happen to get into government. So that was recently extended. But before that was extended, I was thinking, right, before this comes off, I'm going to buy fuel in bulk because I think the price is going to go up and then I'm going to go and save money. So that's a really useful tool if you think the price is going to go up soon. And if it doesn't go up, well, you could just keep buying fuel regularly. And when the price does eventually go up, and it eventually will, then you start using it. So that's a tool that I found really useful myself recently, and we've made quite a bit of savings on it. So some final tips on cutting down the fat. Know your limits. This is really big. So you've all heard of New Zealand's DIY, do-it-yourself culture. Well, DIY is great if you've got the time and necessary expertise. You have got a problem if you do something like you go, oh, I'm a DIY expert. Let me just chop down this interior wall. I know what I'm doing. And next thing you know, half the ceiling caves in because you took out a load-bearing wall. You didn't know what you were doing. And you've got tens of thousands of dollars on your hand. What I'm trying to say is, sure, do DIY if it aligns well with you, but there's a point when it pays to get in a professional. You can really lose a lot of money by doing something yourself and not doing it well when you could have paid for a professional. Go for it.
How do you know the boundary? Because I think in New Zealand, everyone's like DIY, and like I see some like my friends and like their mom and dad, they're like really into it. But then I feel like if I did that, it would go horribly wrong.
So if you're not feeling confident, first of all, why put yourself through the stress of doing it when you could get someone else to do it? It's probably not worth, well, rather, paying that money is probably worth you feeling less stressed. So that on its own is worthwhile to think of. But what I would do is I'd ask around. I'd say to people, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Do you think it's a DIY sort of job or get in a professional? And I'd also like, for example, with a painting job, go into, say, Mitre 10 or Bunnings, just talk to the people there. They've got time. They're there to go and help out customers. They're there to help you. So if in doubt, just ask around and get some people's opinions. Get some help. Maybe you've got friends that are involved in that scene and they can give you guidance. So again, we've got a friend big on doing things up. She has gone and taught us some tips and tricks. And as well, when we're not sure, we just ask her, is this doable? And she'll help. And she'll say yes or no. Yep.
Facebook pages are a good one, like specific Facebook, like for that hobby or that little niche. You could go there and just post your project and say, hey, what do people think?
Exactly. I really agree with that. If in doubt, and again, coming back to the whole people-pleasing sort of side of thing, it's hard to put yourself out there. It's hard to ask for help. But you'll probably find that when you do, more people are willing to actually help you than there are people laughing at you. Again, personal story. So my wife and I, we wanted to rent in Raglan. And I don't know if you guys know about Raglan renting in summer. Yeah, well, it's all Airbnbs. The locals are literally being driven out of town. They can't find rentals for themselves. So we posted on Facebook and we immediately got a whole bunch of blowback, people going, you should go and live in a cardboard box, pretty much. Some delightful comments like that. We had to go door knocking and actually asking people, but it worked. And in the end, that we got a number of people actually offering us rentals, and at much lower than the normal market price, because we'd bothered to actually knock on the doors and ask. It was hard to put myself out there, really hard, but I'd ask for help and I got a return on that. There's people that look at you and they say, go away. But there's also people that are out there that will help you. And rejection really hurts, but it's worth giving it a go. Again, practice where you can, build that resilience.
Rejection thing, yeah, that has a mental impact. It's like, I feel like I could save money to buy a house, but, you know, how can I go through the stress of it? I'd like to, because that would be, I think, as you said, it would free up resources for me. But yeah, dealing with it, you know, it's the emotional, like, challenge.
Yeah, it's where can you get that support from? So we're talking about something that drains your batteries. You need to think about, well, what recharges my batteries? Is there a close friend or confidant that I can talk to and just cry about that? Oh my God, I went to this house and I got rejected and that hurt. Like, they looked at me like I was some sort of trash that they found on the floor. Believe me, this has happened to me. I'd be like, oh my God, what have I done to you? But you also do things as well that will build you up emotionally too. That is so key, because if you're building yourself up, then you've got more capacity for these things. But yeah, it's really important. The other thing as well is start small. Better to build something small consistently than something big inconsistently. So better for you to say, spend $10 less a week on food rather than spend $200 less a week on food. Just start small and you can always build it up, because a small habit done successfully over time is going to be far more powerful than a big habit. Oh, not a big habit, sorry, a one-off big thing. Now, we're running admittedly a little later than I'd like, but I want to open the floor to you guys. And do you guys have any tips and tricks of your own that you'd like to share? Because you've been doing pretty good throughout. All right, well, we'll keep going. So, spending on what matters. What is really key is that when you've got money, you want to spend on the things that are going to make your life a better place. It's going to make you happy. It's going to meet your goals. So the first thing you need to know is, what's actually going to make me happy? You've got to have clear life goals that you're working towards, clear priorities. Then you've got to know, where is my money actually going right now? Am I spending $500 a week on groceries or $200 a week? If you don't know, you're not going to be able to work out what changes you should make. So it's spending tracker. There are a lot of options that you've got to help you actually make that habit shift and spend on things that matter. So for myself, right now, something I am agonizing over is there's this course that I really want to go on. And it's this big course about, it actually should help me with my people pleasing and reducing that. And I'm going, it is $600. How the heck am I going to afford $600? Well, first, I'm talking to the organizers to see whether they can reduce that at all. So that's one side of the equation. Okay, and then the other side of the equation, what I'm doing is I'm telling myself, right, well, what will this course earn me? Imagine if my people pleasing reduced. What effect would this have on my everyday life? How much more money could I make from my business? What can I build? What effect will this have on the people around me? And that's the sort of thing that it's giving me that reassurance that, yes, this is a lot of money. I'm pretty sure about the benefits I'm going to get from it. So let's go ahead, let's do it, and just make the jump. And it's a really tough one to do, because it's like, for myself, my parents were misers, putting it bluntly. They were great at saving, and never spending. And that's a habit that's rubbed off onto me. I am so reluctant to spend money, even on the things that really matter to me. And I've got to constantly remind myself to do that. If you're in that sort of habit and I've got no issues with saving, I recommend things like diverting money from your bank account and tell yourself that I've got to spend this money on this particular thing. So say you've got a fun account where you treat yourself. Something you can do to dial it up a notch if you still find that you're not spending the money. So you tell yourself, either I spend this money on me or I'm donating it to this charity. Give yourself, then you'll find you'll have no issue spending that money all of a sudden. Say, for example, that you don't like spending on your clothes. Give yourself a clothes budget and force yourself to go and actually spend that money on yourself. And then what you can go and do is if you aren't spending that money, force yourself to donate. That's something that can really work well. Also, take a bit longer to actually consider a decision before you just say no. It's like for that course. If I just went and said, oh, can't afford it, no, not worth it, then I wouldn't be going ahead with it. But I took some time, I really thought through the benefits, and I told myself, now, am I still going to be financially secure if I go ahead with this? And the answer was yes. So, am I sure about the benefits that I'm going to get? Yes. So, should I go ahead and do it? I suppose, okay. And I've pushed myself along and eventually got to the point where I've gone, okay, yes. It might take some time. But the big thing to remember is spending money is not bad in of itself. This whole seminar so far, we've been talking about how to cut down. But if your only mentality, if all you can do is save and cut down, you're missing a big thing, because money is a tool and it can get you towards where you want to go. So you have to have both sides of the equation, spending as well as saving. When you've got both, then that helps pull you towards your goals. And that is really, really important. So, yeah, go for it.
I don't know if you're going to talk about it, but it's similar to what you said about spending on what matters. The way I think about it is, like, if I want to buy a phone, and I think, oh, well, I'm going to try to buy the cheapest phone possible, but the problem is, the cheaper that you buy, the more you have to replace it, or it gets outdated or whatever it is. And then I heard of this concept called cost per use. So I decide that, okay, I'm going to use the phone at least for 5 years, no matter what is the change in technology, amazing camera, whatever it is. Because first of all, when I buy the phone, a month later, there's going to be the same kind of phone for the same price with a better camera. Just can't help it. But if I calculate the cost per price, so I spend maybe $200, and then I'm using it for 5 years, it roughly turns into X amount per day. And that's an amount I can afford. I can afford $1 or whatever per day. It makes sense for me. Yes. And then I'm happy at the end of 5 years, I can chuck it. I can get another phone because I've got my use out of the X amount that I spent. Or I buy new shoes. But if I buy new shoes and it's like $500, I would never buy $500 shoes. But if I'm only going to wait for like that one day, that's too expensive. That I don't want a $500 shoes. But $500 shoes, hiking shoes, and I'm going to use it every weekend. Yes, I am going to spend $500 for that shoes because I'm going to use it every weekend, and I need to keep my feet safe or whatever. So that's how you would consider. Yes, okay, $500 for shoes, I wouldn't spend it, but what are you spending it for, and are you getting your cost per use out of it?
I love that. And I'm going to follow up with another shoe example. So how many of you guys have come across Brazilian high-heeled shoes before? I know we've got two in the audience at least. So essentially, they're really high-quality, high-heeled shoes where your feet are actually really well secured. It's really comfortable. And if you're going to buy high-heeled shoes, you're probably better to buy quality because I'm not a high-heeled shoe connoisseur, I have to admit, but apparently it's pretty uncomfortable and your ankles might not be very well supported and you could hurt yourself and it's uncomfortable to walk in. So what you'd be doing is you'd be spending more money, but if you're going to just put them on, put them away and never wear them, there's no point. But if you're actually going to wear them and make use of them, then there is a point. And that's very much an example. And again, buying quality, not just for how long it will last, because of course, buying a higher quality product, it will last longer, but also enjoyment of use. That's really important too. So take the shoes that I'm wearing right now. They have actually been rubbing against the back of my leg, like back of my ankles, and giving me some lovely sores. And I probably should have invested in some higher quality shoes that weren't going to do that, because right now I'm going, I really do not want to walk in these shoes. And it wasn't worth me saving a couple of dollars to get some uncomfortable shoes. So that's another concept too, which is really important. Essentially, spending money on yourself isn't bad. Just make sure you know what you're spending it for, and you're spending it on things that are actually going to matter to you. It's actually going to push the dial and create something that you want in your life. That I think is just so, so important, because then otherwise you go down the money is like, I've got to save money, I've got to save money, I've got to save money all the time. And that's not a healthy attitude. You've got to be able to save, but you've also got to be able to spend. So anyway, that's a lesson I've had to learn for myself too, and I've really struggled. So does anyone else I love that story that you shared there. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share on spending on things that matter to them?
I think, with clothes, especially, like I'll never buy it on the spot. Like only if I'm like 100% sure, then I'll buy it on the spot. Otherwise, I'll always go away and think about it. And I'm like, if I'm thinking about this in a week, then I'll come back and buy it.
Yeah. Just adding to that, some of the things that we might want, it might not be an urgent need, and it might be important to you, but it might not be urgent. So you could wait around for the right time. Like there's a sale in a few months' time, and things like that. You can plan for it ahead of time. So if it's especially electronics, right? It's usually better to buy it during a sale. Even if it's a new model, and even if you could wait for a few weeks and buy it, you usually get a few $100s off. And it's been really beneficial for me as well. And there's my phone, I was looking to buy it, and then I wanted to get it the first day it released in New Zealand, which is not ideal. But then I realized it had a bundle as part of the pre-order. If you pre-ordered it, versus buying it on day one. So I took the risk, and then I decided that as part of the pre-order, they gave us a Wi-Fi router, which I never planned to use. So what I did is I did the pre-order, and I sold off that router online on the Facebook Marketplace. And that router was like a few $100s. So I got a very good deal overall, and got the product on the first day with a little bit of planning.
Again, really good strategy, really good technique. And there's always essentially creativity, like what you did there, is the key to the game when you're trying to save money. Because the more options you can think and you can identify, the more possibility you're going to find something that's better than what you'd had in mind before. But at the same time, analysis paralysis. There's a cost to just sitting there all day, coming up with all of these options. And I could do this, I could invest in that, I could invest in that, I could spend on that, I could save on that. You'll just get so bogged down that you don't do any of it. And you probably would have been better to do something that was less efficient and actually do it, rather than just spend your time thinking about everything. Again, something I do sometimes. Not the best idea, but I'm working on it. So, come to the end of the seminar, and I realized that we haven't actually gone and done the prize giveaway. I got so actually caught up in all of this. So what we're going to go and do is, what would be a fair way to go and actually do the prize giveaway? We're going to be giving away some free coaching. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to go and do a random number generator, actually. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Unfortunately, Anura missed out. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Come on. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to refresh it because I don't want it to So how am I going to do it? So I click generate. So when I click generate, that's going to be the result. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. No, but I clicked on it and it generated it. So it was said 5 before and it said 5 this time. So congratulations. You're going to get some free coaching. All right. So again, just looping back here to the end. So again, that process that I started with at the beginning, start with your priorities, move to tracking, to getting that awareness of what you're actually spending on these different priorities. Then you can start chopping things that don't matter and then growing the things that do matter. That's the process that I recommend you all follow. So thank you for coming. Outside, we've got some samosas there ready to go. So feel free, chat, spend some time. Next time as well, we're going to be having another seminar in a month's time. So keep your eyes peeled out for that. As well, as you might know, we're offering courses online. We teach people how to go and manage their money well. So we go through things that we haven't actually been able to cover in today's session, like how to identify your key priorities, spending trackers, budgets, investment. So this is part of the overall puzzle. And if you'd like to learn more, please take a look online. We can have a chat about the course and what it looks like too. And yeah, there's YouTube videos and stuff. So keep engaged, keep part of the community, and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you.